So welcome to another video here at Back to Classics. Today we're going to discuss the 750 F1 and more specifically these two special editions of the 750 F1, which is quite remarkable. We have two in the workshop at the same time from two different limited edition runs they did in the late 80s. But before we go into these two bikes, let's first dive into the history behind the 750 F1. And more particular, the start of the belt drive Ducatis. Already in 1973, or maybe even before that, but Fabio Taglioni, he envisioned the use of a rubber belt drive to drive the camshaft instead of the bevel drive that was in use at the time. Advantages of that being that the construction could be much simpler, and also it would have been much lighter than the used bevel drive at that point. So the belt drive configuration first saw its way on a very specific prototype made in 1973, which was a dual cam overhead cam 500cc Grand Prix racer, in fact in a prototype form, as we can see in a picture that we will drop in here. But it only saw its further development in the late 1970s when Ducati went ahead and developed a completely new engine to replace the much problematic parallel twin bikes that they made at the time, and also to have a bike below the range of the larger displacement bevel drive engines. And that became the 500cc Panta, the SL 500 Panta, introduced in 1979. And the engine for that model was completely newly designed, much more compact. A lot of issues that were coming about with the bevel drive engine were sorted. It was also a mirror image of the bevel drive engine, in the sense that it incorporated the clutch on the right side instead of on the left, making use of the new rule to have left side gear change as obligatory. So that was all done with the 500 Panta. Later that became a 600cc version of the same bike, and later even a 650cc version. But Ducati, being Ducati, went racing, and racing is always the source of new models, and especially the most beautiful models that Ducati ever produced, also for the street. That racing was quite successful with the belt drive engine. First also in 500 form, later in 600, later the TT2, 600cc, very successful racing bike. That became the TT1 in 750cc form. It goes a little bit too far to go into detail about these bikes, and we'll sure to do that in a separate video at some point. But in the end, that resulted in Ducati's entry in the Formula 1 races of the late 1980s, the 750cc Formula 1 races, and they were also very successful in that department. So, as is always the case with Ducati being successful on the racetrack, at some point there is a street model focused on that, sort of commemorating the wins of Ducati on the track. And that became the 1985 Ducati 750 F1. That featured the 750cc version of the Panta engine that we saw before, in a modified frame that was more or less based on the racing TT1 and TT2 bikes, with some alterations for street use. And that was further updated in 1986 with some minor differences compared to the model year before. So the first of the special editions of the F1 that came about was the Montjuich, as we can see here. I'm sure the pronunciation of that Catalan mountain is completely wrong, but I will do my best to make something out of it. Why was it called Montjuich? Because that was a circuit back in the 1970s and 80s where Ducati had been very successful, going back to the 1960s even, Well, to commemorate the successes they had on that racetrack, they named this limited edition of 200 bikes based on the 750 F1. Well, they named it after that circuit. Specific for the Montjuich is that they all came with a plate and with a number on it indicating the build number. This here is example number 50, but it goes up to about 200. The exact number of all these models we'll be showing you in the description, but around 200 for each of one. And they featured a lot of special parts, a lot of tuning compared to the normal version of the 750 F1, really setting it apart. This was absolutely something quite remarkable when it came to market in 1986, as being the bike with the components here are absolutely beautiful and top shelf for what was available in that year. So the details on this bike, looking at the front fork, the Forcella Italia front fork, highly adjustable, fully adjustable in fact, and well, quite remarkable for that era. 40 millimeter as well, so well, it's the top shelf as well as many other components. The brakes are these gold lines made by Brembo, 4-piston caliper on each side. Fuel tank was specifically made for this Montjuich model in aluminium, which was specifically for this model. The later models received the steel fuel tank of the 750 F1. It was a solo seat, no option to take your girlfriend, which is also seen by the lack of pillion footrest. Even it lacks the bracket on the frame, so there's no way to mount any. Then going further to the rear swing arm, which was specifically made in aluminium for this model. An absolutely beautiful set of wheels made by Marvik in conjunction with Acront. It's an aluminium rim with a magnesium 3-spoke centerpiece bolted together. Very lightweight, again, top shelf. And for this model, for the first time, they had 16-inch rim sizes front and rear, where the 750 F1 had a 16-inch in the front and a 18-inch in the rear. This was completely at 16-inch. And well, we'll be driving it later on, and I will explain a little bit more. It's a unique experience being on the road with these small wheels. Engine-wise, again, Ducati really did a great effort of tuning that engine. There were specific camshafts made for the Montjuich, which also saw their way in other bikes. Larger inlet tracts, exhaust tracts were made. A specific dry clutch with a vented cover. 40mm Delorto carburetors. So again, everything was done. Oh, and then I forget to mention the 2-in-1 exhaust with a competition. It says as well on the muffler for what it's like, because it hardly muffles anything, but it says Riservato Competizione, so it is an absolutely racing pedigree bike. That also is seen by the lack of indicators and the lack of a mirror. Now, the idea behind the Montjuich was that it was a more of a track bike than it was a road bike, but they were homologated in some countries, not in all. And that included often also the fitment of indicators and a mirror. All the wiring was pre-done, so also the switch was ready for it, so that wasn't a lot of work. But then at least it would have been road legal, and many were licensed and driven on the road, obviously. So in all, a very special, very unique bike, and unique that we have it here. Now, we did some work on this bike. It has been restored, not by us, but some years ago it has been restored. And it was recently purchased by a client of ours with the desire to have it run over and checked, a little bit adjusted. We have fitted new belts, new oil, obviously, new filters, new fluids everywhere. And it is good to go, as we will show you later. So after the limited run of the Montjuich, Ducati did a second limited run, and that became the Laguna Seca. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a Laguna Seca at this moment here. It was sort of a deviation from the hardcore style the Montjuich had, back to the original specifications of the 750 F1, the normal street model. And although it was again a limited edition run with a lot of special parts on it, it was not the hardcore version as the Montjuich was. So it was still a very nice bike, but Ducati got some criticism for, well, mounting all these other parts that were standard on the F1, like the wheels that were so special on the Montjuich became the standard Oscam wheels. Other parts were removed from the special edition, but the engine retained its tuning, as well as the camshafts. A new exhaust was fitted, as well as indicators to make it perfectly road legal. Well, and then the third and final edition of the 750 F1 in its special form became this, and that is the Santa Monica. Again, named after a circuit as the other two. Named after the Italian Autodromo Santa Monica in Misano. Again, where Ducati had been very successful in Formula 1 races. And well, that is what it became. Sort of went back to the original specification of the Montjuich, not completely, because it did have the indicators, the mirrors, and the much quieter exhaust as the Laguna Seca did to make it road legal. It also featured a dual seat like the Laguna Seca, so it is biposto. You can take your girlfriend with you, but it did retain a lot of special components like the Forcella Italiana front fork, fully floating discs, and the wheels that were on the Montjuich came back on the Santa Monica, this time again the Marvik Acront 16-inch wheels. Now, this bike being in a very, very nice unrestored condition, it has 5,000 kilometers from new, and that is, if you see the complete condition of the bike it is in, we believe that to be completely original. It had been standing still for a long, long time, so we actually had a lot of work on getting this bike back to road specifications again. Obviously, engine service, carburetors, the fuel tank were all, very old fuel was in there, so that had to be cleaned out and done. Someone went in there replacing a lot of wires in the wiring loom, which was a bit of a mess, but we, well, all that is sorted and back to its original specifications, and with a set of new tires in 16-inch, which are not easy to get. At least you don't have very large choice between the manufacturers, but we were able to get this bike up and running again and fully road worthy. So let's actually take them out. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an impression about driving these wonderful machines. It must be said these are rather hardcore sporting machines, more meant to be driven on the racetrack than on the road. The sitting position is quite sporty. Yeah, well, the bodywork, the position, it all adds up to being a true racing bike, especially the Montjuich. Well, that's another thing that can be discussed is these 16-inch wheels that both these models have. You need to get a little used to driving these bikes, because the geometry is a little different than if you're used to 18-inch or 17-inch wheels. Yeah, well, it is a little bit of a anomaly in motorcycle history, but in the late 80s, 16-inch wheels were sort of well, the new way to go. Where eventually it became, the norm became 17-inch wheels on sporting bikes. But that said, it is a little bit of an iconic era to have these 16-inch wheels fitted. But apart from that, they're very fun to drive, very solid, and they give you a lot of confidence if you get used to the geometry. So, well, that's about the driving. That concludes the two projects for us. Maybe a little bit tweaks here and there to do still on both bikes to finalize the projects so they can go to their respective owners. And something that might be of interest, the Santa Monica is probably for sale. And we will be posting that on our website, of course, if that does come to an offering. So keep an eye out there. And be sure to follow us and keep an eye on our website. So this concludes another episode here at Back to Classics. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Toodaloo-dokey. See you next time.